The restaurant lights shimmered against the polished glasses, each one catching a reflection of my mother's birthday cake waiting to be cut. My family had gathered around smiling, too brightly clinking forks against plates, as though we were part of some perfect picture. I was tired, but proud. I had something to share, something I had worked toward for 15 years. So I said it, calm, almost casual, yet my chest swelled as I spoke. I finally paid off my apartment. One Fay High Trio Dola in Manhattan, and it is mine now. Completely mine. The words hung in the air. For a brief second, silence followed a rare silence at any family dinner. Then Vanessa, my brother's wife, leaned back in her chair, with that sharp smile she wore when she wanted to cut deep. She lifted her wine glass, crimson liquid swirling. Family will live there, she said. Her tone carried the authority of someone announcing a fact, not offering a suggestion. Then she added almost sweetly, $1 million home cannot belong to just you. Don't be selfish. I froze. My hand instinctively reached for the envelope, tucked inside my bag, under the table, the crisp deed papers, still carrying the scent of fresh ink and the notary's stamp. I pressed my thumb against its edge, as if that paper was the only proof of my existence. The table erupted in chatter, not outrage, not laughter, but a string of approving nods. My father coughed, my mother looked down at her plate, and Daniel, my brother, let out a laugh too, forced to be real. None of them contradicted Vanessa. Inside, I felt the sting first. Sharp humiliation, like I had just been stripped naked in public. I had dreamed of this day, thought they would be proud. Instead, they acted as though my life's greatest achievement was a communal fund waiting to be claimed. I looked around the table. People were smiling, but their eyes were somewhere else. Plates clattered, forks touched porcelain. I could have been a ghost. Invisible, unheard, while the party carried on as though I had said nothing at all. What they didn't know was, the papers in my bag carried more than a title deed. But I'll explain that later. Tell me where you're watching from and subscribe. Families and money. We need to talk. I drove home from the restaurant that night, with my chest tight and my hands gripping the wheel harder than I should have. Manhattan traffic blurred past, neon signs flickered, but all I could hear was Vanessa's voice. $1 million home cannot belong to just you. I had imagined my family raising their glasses to celebrate me. Instead, they had nodded along with her as if my years of sacrifice meant nothing. 15 years of cutting corners, skipping vacations, working late into the night, dismissed with a single smirk. At home, I laid the envelope on my dining table. The deed papers looked plain, a few typed lines, black ink, a notary stamp in the corner. Yet to me, they were proof that I wasn't a failure. Proof that my name could stand on its own. I traced the embossed seal with my fingertip and whispered, mine. But in the echo of that empty apartment, the word felt fragile. The next morning, I checked my email before leaving for work. Among the usual invoices and project drafts, one message stopped me cold. It wasn't meant for me. It was forwarded by mistake. The subject line read, Family Arrangements. It was from my mother. If Morgan doesn't agree, we'll use the children. Vanessa is right, a large apartment must serve the family. It is only fair. Daniel will move in with her. Morgan can adjust. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. We'll use the children. My own mother writing about her grandchildren as bargaining chips against me. The betrayal sank deeper than Vanessa's words. It was one thing for an in-law to be greedy. It was another for my own parents to conspire behind my back. I sat there in my kitchen coffee, cooling in the mug beside me, wondering how many times they had talked about me as though I were an obstacle, not their child. That evening, I tried to test the waters to see if the email was just poorly phrased. I called my mother. She answered cheerfully as though nothing had happened. How's work, sweetheart? Fine, I said, my throat dry. I saw an email. About me. About the apartment. Silence. Then a chuckle. Oh, you take everything too seriously. We're only thinking about what's best for everyone. For everyone but me, I replied. You've always been independent. You'll be fine. Think about the kids, they need space. She ended the call before I could respond. I sat in my quiet apartment staring at the city skyline outside my window. Lights sparkled on the river, taxis honked below, yet I felt utterly alone. For years, I had assumed my distance from them was temporary, that one day they'd see me differently. Now I realized they never would. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet, disguised as concern, wrapped in family language. They smiled at dinners, passed me dishes, toasted birthdays, all while plotting to erase me from the very place I called home. But what they didn't know was that silence doesn't mean surrender. I had spent my whole life building something they thought they could claim with words, and if they pushed further, I would push back harder. It was a Saturday morning when the knock came. Sharp hurried, the kind of knock that expects obedience. I opened the door, and there they stood, Daniel, Vanessa, and their 2 children flanked by suitcases. Not 1 or 2, but 5 of them stacked high like they were checking into a hotel. Vanessa pushed past me without waiting. "We're moving in," she announced already, dragging 1 suitcase down the hall. The children squealed, running into the living room, dropping backpacks on my rug. I froze in the doorway. "What are you talking about?" She didn't bother answering directly. Instead, she spun around in the middle of my living room, arms wide, phone raised. "Look at this $1 million view," she said, recording a video. Within minutes, it was on TikTok. Finally moving into our $1 million Manhattan apartment. In Family First. By the time I saw it, the clip already had hundreds of shares, comments ranging from envy to outrage. Strangers congratulated her as if she had achieved something. No one knew that the deed sat in my drawer, my name alone printed on it. Daniel trailed behind, carrying the heaviest bags. "It's temporary," he muttered, eyes avoiding mine. Vanessa thought it would be good for the kids. The kids had already claimed the sofa, turning on cartoons, spilling chips from a bag they brought. My once tidy living room looked like a playroom in under 5 minutes. I stood in the middle of it all, invisible in my own home. Vanessa disappeared into the master bedroom, opening my closet, shifting hangers. "This will do," she said. "Morgan, you can move your things into the smaller room. It's only fair." The word stung. Fair. As though fairness meant erasing my years of work. As though fairness meant handing over the one place I had built for myself. I wanted to shout, to throw their bags out onto the street. Instead, I stood there gripping my phone, scrolling through Vanessa's video again. Her voice echoed, "This $1 million view is mine now." That night, I slept in the guest room of my own apartment. My bed, the one I had chosen carefully, the mattress I had paid off in installments, now belonged to them. Lying awake, I listened to the muffled laughter of Vanessa and Daniel through the wall. The children thumped down the hallway past midnight. Humiliation has a sound. It is the quiet creak of your own floorboards under someone else's feet. But what they didn't know was that every move they made, every post Vanessa shared, was not just arrogance. It was evidence. And I was already keeping records. Family dinners had always been tense, but that evening at my parents' house, the tension had a pulse. I brought a bottle of red wine, though I doubted anyone would drink it. My parents' dining room smelled of roast chicken and garlic bread, but the air was thicker than the steam rising from the dishes. Vanessa sat at the head of the table as if she belonged there. Daniel, my own brother, had grown quieter since their so-called move into my apartment, but he followed her lead like a shadow. The children darted between chairs, shouting, spilling juice. No one stopped them. I sat at the far end, clutching the edge of my chair, trying to remember how dinners used to feel, laughter teasing stories of school and work. Those days were gone. Halfway through the meal, Vanessa put down her fork with a deliberate clink. She leaned forward, her voice carrying over the table. "Let's end the confusion, shall we? Morgan's name might be on a piece of paper, but that apartment is family property. It belongs to all of us." The words hit like glass shattering. My mother gave a tiny nod. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Even Daniel, eyes on his plate, didn't speak up. I stared at Vanessa. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes were sharp, daring me to object. "You think a deed means anything," she added. "Family is bigger than ink. And if you really cared, you'd know it's not about you. It's about giving these kids space to grow." She gestured toward her children, who were now fighting over a bread roll. I felt the humiliation rise in waves, first hot across my face, then heavy in my chest. My own family people who had watched me work myself to exhaustion were agreeing with her. I had imagined this scenario in nightmares, but hearing it aloud, endorsed by silence and nods, was worse than I ever pictured. I reached for my bag, steady hands, despite the chaos inside me. From it, I pulled a plain white envelope. The notary's stamp pressed faintly against the paper. I placed it on the table between the wine glasses and salt shaker. Vanessa's eyes flicked to it, a flicker of doubt crossing her face before she masked it with disdain. "That's just paper," she said again. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back, my voice, low but clear. "You believe it's family property because you say so. But this envelope says otherwise. And you'll hear what's inside, just not tonight." The room went quiet. Forks paused midair. Even the children stilled, sensing something had shifted. I slid the envelope back into my bag. I'll tell you that part later, I said. The rest of dinner carried on in a charade of normalcy. Plates passed, fake laughter filled the gaps, but no one looked at me directly. I had become invisible yet again. Invisible, but not powerless. What they didn't know was that I had more than a deed. I had patience. And patience, when sharpened, becomes a blade. Nights grew heavier after that dinner. I no longer saw my apartment as sanctuary. It had become a stage where others acted out their entitlement. Every time Vanessa posted another picture from her new home, I screenshotted it. Every video she filmed from my balcony, every smug caption about family property, all of it went into a folder on my laptop titled Simply Evidence. I was quiet in their presence, too quiet perhaps. Vanessa mistook it for surrender. Daniel mistook it for peace. My parents mistook it for maturity. None of them saw the truth. I was waiting, listening, collecting. One Tuesday evening, after a long day sketching designs for a client, I returned to find my kitchen cluttered with takeout containers. My refrigerator door was covered with Vanessa's children's drawings, scribbles of stick figures, hearts, and dollar signs. One drawing in particular caught my eye, a house with 3 windows, my balcony drawn in exaggerated detail. Underneath, in Vanessa's bold handwriting, it read, "Our home." I took it down and slipped it into the evidence folder. Later that week, an email pinged on my phone while I sat on the subway. The subject line was simple: plan. It wasn't meant for me, it was another accidental forward. From Vanessa to my mother. Once we're settled, we'll push Morgan to sign. The kids love it here already. If we sell the place, the 4 of us can split the money. You'll finally have the retirement you deserve, and Daniel and I can start fresh. Morgan has no choice. No choice. The phrase repeated in my mind like an echo in an empty hall. I gripped the phone so tightly that the passenger beside me glanced at my white knuckles. That night, I saved the email, printed a copy, slid it into the same folder as the TikTok screenshots. My evidence folder was no longer just digital. It was physical, thickening with every week. Then came the message that made me pause. It wasn't an email this time. It was a messenger screenshot sent by a mutual friend who knew how far things had gone. Vanessa, in her own words, bragging to her friends, "I've practically won the lottery. $1 million apartment in Manhattan without paying a cent. Morgan is too weak to fight." She had attached a selfie, my bedroom in the background, my bed behind her, my carefully chosen artwork on the wall. And she captioned it with a single line that burned hotter than any insult. "Everything she has is mine now." I didn't respond to the friend who sent it. I didn't share my anger. Instead, I saved the screenshot and printed it out. Some nights I sat at my desk, flipping through the stack, the drawings, the TikTok posts, the email, the screenshots, each piece a puzzle building toward the picture of betrayal. Betrayal not just by Vanessa, but by my own blood, my parents who stayed silent, nodding along as if erasing me was natural. Humiliation had turned into something else. I was no longer invisible. I was a shadow watching, storing, preparing. What they didn't know was that patience has a breaking point, and mine was almost here. The elevator doors opened into a quiet corridor that smelled faintly of furniture polish and old paper. Framed nautical prints lined the walls, each ship cutting through a stubborn sea. It felt appropriate. I walked past them with a leather folder under my arm and the steady calm I fake when I am not sure whether to sit or run. The plaque on the door read Caldwell and Weiss Attorneys in sober brass. Inside, everything was wood and whisper-tall bookcases, a grandfather clock that measured time like a judge, and a conference table that looked older than any of us. My parents arrived together, shoulders touching in that way married people do, when they believe proximity is the same as unity. Daniel trailed 2 steps behind them. Vanessa floated in last phone, up smile on, as if there were a red carpet somewhere. I could not see. She angled the lens toward her cheekbones. "We are at the reading," she told whoever would listen. "Prayers up." She winked. The receptionist frowned. I kept my eyes on the folder. Mr. Caldwell entered with the slow assurance of a man who has told too many families, too many truths. He placed a thick will binder on the table, its spine labeled in tidy type, "Last Will and Revocable Trust of Henry Whitaker." My grandfather's name looked strange in that unemotional font. Caldwell's glasses rode low on his nose. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "We will go through the will, then the trust provisions, and then any letters of intent Mr. Whitaker left." I nodded. The other Saturday, Vanessa whispered something to my mother about celebration dinners and good timing. Somewhere in my chest, a door closed. Caldwell began with the small things: the clean edges of a life bequest to a veteran's charity, a pair of antique watches to an old friend, modest gifts to two cousins who had kept in touch with holiday cards. He spoke in a measured cadence. The clock kept time behind him. My grandfather had always liked order. Even his jokes arrived on schedule. Then Caldwell cleared his throat and turned a page. We will now address residential protections and the primary residence designation of Morgan Whitaker. My father shifted in his chair. Vanessa sat up straighter. Daniel stared at his hands. Caldwell glanced at me over the rim of his glasses. Several years ago, Mr. Whitaker executed a declaration naming your apartment as his designated family homestead descendant gift. He coupled that with a transfer on death instrument and a homestead affidavit filed and recorded. The instrument did not convey title while he lived. It created protections that spring upon his death. Those protections attach today. Vanessa blinked. English, please. Caldwell did not look at her. The effect is this: the apartment is affirmed as Morgan's sole property, insulated from family claims or forced cohabitation demands. Mr. Whitaker also funded a legal trust specifically to defend that residence against any attempt to encroach, occupy, or co-own without Morgan's express written consent. How much? My mother asked, voice small. Caldwell turned another page. Tu fais bâtir de la. The Whitaker Home Integrity Trust pays for council filings, private security if necessary, and any relocation costs to remove unauthorized occupants. It is automatic. Morgan does not need to sue first. The trustee is empowered to act upon notice. I heard the words like distant thunder. Tu fais bâtir de la was a number I could not place in my palm. It felt less like money, and more like a wall I had not known was there finally visible in daylight. For a long breath, nobody spoke. Vanessa recovered first. You cannot be serious, she said, half laugh, half snarl. He never even visited that place. Caldwell folded his hands. Mr. Whitaker visited once quietly. He sat by the window while Miss Whitaker was at work. He wrote me that he liked the way the light fell on the floor. I remembered one afternoon when my doorman mentioned a polite older gentleman who waited in the lobby with a newspaper, asked whether the building kept a good superintendent, and complimented the hydrangeas out front. My throat burned. Daniel looked at me, then quick, guilty, like a child who knows he has stayed out past dark. My father stared at the binder, as if he could lift the ink with his eyes. My mother's shoulders sank an inch. Caldwell continued, There is also a no contest provision. Any beneficiary who challenges the integrity of Morgan's primary residence or encourages others to do so forfeits their share of the residual trust. To be clear, that includes indirect pressure, online campaigns, and occupancy without written permission. Vanessa's phone clinked against the table. Residual what? The remaining estate, Caldwell said. After specific bequests, the trust holds a diversified portfolio Mr. Whitaker built. Income is to be distributed to named beneficiaries on a schedule. If a person triggers the no contest clause, their portion is reallocated. How much income are we talking? My father asked, voice steadying as if numbers were the only thing left to grab. Caldwell lifted a thin sheet. Projections estimate annual disbursements in the high five figures per beneficiary. That is subject to market performance, but the trust is conservative. He paused. There is a letter I am to read aloud now. Mr. Whitaker requested it. He broke a smaller envelope seal. The paper was heavy, my grandfather's handwriting, copied into typescript, but still his. I could hear his tobacco, rough voice in each line. Family, I am old, not foolish. I have watched kindness counted as weakness and generosity mistaken for vacancy. A home is not a spare room in a storm. It is a person's spine. If you think you are entitled to Morgan's spine, you are not family. You are weathering posts waiting to rot. I have set aside funds to ensure Morgan's door may close when needed and open when chosen. If you push that door without invitation, you will find a lock you cannot pick and a cost you cannot bear. The trust is my hand on that lock. I expect no thank you. I expect only respect. The rest of you will be fine. Work is a discipline. Love is a duty. Money is not love and not duty. Do not confuse the three. Henry. The room did not breathe for a few seconds. The clock ticked like it was tapping on the table with one finger. Something in me unwound. Something else went taut. Vanessa laughed too loudly. So the old man writes a poem, and we all pretend it is law. She turned to my mother. Tell him we were already living there. You told me the kids needed space. You said a big apartment like that is a family thing. My mother would not meet her eyes. I said a lot of things, she whispered. Then she looked at me and added, I did not know about this. Caldwell placed a second document atop the binder. Because of the social posts over the last weeks, videos and photos taken from within the apartment, the trustee has already authorized council to send notices. The trust retained a firm yesterday. They will ask unauthorized occupants to vacate within 72 hours. If not, the trust will fund removal and pursue costs. It will also notify your building's management and insurance. Vanessa's face drained. Daniel swallowed. We can talk about this, he said to me, quiet as a hallway apology. We can work something out. I opened my leather folder and slid a few printed images toward Caldwell Vanessa's balcony video with her caption in thick letters, the selfie in my bedroom, the email promising to split precedes the message where I had no choice. Caldwell glanced at each, nodding once per page like a metronome. These will suffice, he said. Thank you. I did not look at Vanessa. There is a cruel mercy in refusing to meet a person's eyes when they finally see themselves. Caldwell turned to the last item. One more directive. Mr. Whitaker asked that I read this only if he sensed conflict would calm when the right person wrote the right check. He took out a final sheet thinner, almost translucent. A separate educational trust for the children exists. It is modest by comparison, but enough to cover schooling and basic needs for some years. It is independent of the no contest clause. Mr. Whitaker did not wish his great-grandchildren to pay for their parents' mistakes. Vanessa's shoulders sagged. Daniel shut his eyes. My mother's hand found my father's arm. It was the first moment in the room that did not feel like a sword being sharpened. Caldwell closed the binder. That concludes the reading. Each of you will receive copies. Miss Whitaker, the trustee, will contact you within the day about securing your residence. Your building's management will be copied. I advise all parties to respect the instruments and avoid unnecessary expense. He stood. The meeting was over because he said it was over. People like that do not raise their voice, they raise the floor you are standing on. In the hallway, Vanessa reached for me. You could share, she said. You should. Family is supposed to share. I thought of my grandfather sitting in my lobby with the newspaper asking the doorman about the superintendent and the flowers. I thought of 15 years of quiet discipline, the lunches I packed, the nights I stayed to finish drawings, the rent, I never missed the vacations. I declined because the interest rate was not my friend. I thought of the children's drawings on my refrigerator, dollar signs and hearts a house with 3 windows. Family is supposed to respect, I said. He wrote that in black and white. Vanessa's mouth hardened into its old shape. Everyone online thinks we live there already. I pulled my folder against my ribs. Then I suppose they will enjoy the update. Back inside the conference room, Caldwell handed me a small, sealed envelope, different from the others. My name was handwritten, not typed. From him to you, he said. Private. I slid it into my bag without opening it. There would be time later for the voice of a man who loved clean edges and hydrangeas. There would be time for my apartment's windows to hold the light the way he liked. Outside, the day had turned white bright, the kind that makes even the city's bruises look like reflections. I walked down the steps and into the noise. Somewhere behind me, footsteps. Daniel calling my name. Vanessa hissing at him to stop. My mother not saying anything at all. What they did not know was that the trust was only the wall. The door was still mine to close, and I had just learned how to lock it without apology. The eviction notices went out faster than I expected. 72 hours, that was all. The trust lawyers did not bother with polite letters, they sent certified packets, thick and undeniable. I watched Daniel bring the envelopes upstairs, his shoulders slumped as though each step cost him. Vanessa tore hers open at the kitchen counter, eyes racing over the pages. They cannot do this, she said, voice trembling, but pitched for performance. This is my home now. She pulled out her phone thumb, already flying. Within minutes, there was another post online. Imagine being thrown out of your own family's home. Pray for us. But the comments did not pour in with sympathy. Screenshots of her earlier bragging posts circulated faster side by side with the legal notice she had just shared. The internet does not forget, and it does not forgive contradictions. By nightfall, her name was trending in our city with a tag that burned number, not your home. Daniel avoided the cameras, but he could not avoid the truth. My parents tried calling me, their voices suddenly soft, but I did not answer. There are apologies that come too late. The next evening, I attended a neighborhood association meeting. I had avoided these gatherings before, but now I walked in with a folder under my arm. The board president nodded at me as I slid into a chair. When the floor opened for new business, I stood and spoke. I want to address recent events, I said, holding up a printed screenshot of Vanessa's viral post. Murmurs spread across the room. There has been confusion about who owns my apartment. Let me clear it up. I laid out the deed, the trust documents, the will excerpts. My voice did not rise, but it carried. I explained how my grandfather had foreseen manipulation, how he had protected me with legal walls. Every eye followed the papers as they moved across the table. And what about the people who posted otherwise? One neighbor asked. I looked straight at them. They will not be living there. Not now, not ever. The applause was not loud, but it was steady. For the first time in months, I felt visible, not as a victim, but as an owner, someone with boundaries that could not be rewritten by other people's entitlement. At home that night, I found another message in my inbox. From Vanessa again. You made me look like a fool. Everyone's laughing. You'll regret this. I printed it and slid it into the evidence folder, not out of fear, but out of habit. Because what she did not know was that regret had already changed hands. When the dust finally settled, silence returned to my apartment. No bags in the hallway, no children's toys scattered across my rug, no voices echoing down the corridor that once made me feel like a stranger in my own home. For the first time in months, I could hear only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of traffic below. I stood at the window, the city skyline stretching wide before me, and thought of my grandfather. I finally opened the private envelope Caldwell had handed me after the will reading. Inside was a single note in his sharp, deliberate handwriting. Morgan homes are not just walls. They are proof you survived what others could not take. Keep it, protect it. And if anyone tries to make you invisible inside your own life, remind them that your name is written here. Proud of you. H.W. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the evidence folder, though it did not feel like evidence. It felt like a hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. Vanessa and Daniel moved out under legal pressure, their social media accounts scrubbed of posts that had once flaunted my apartment as theirs. But nothing truly disappears online. The screenshots still circulate. Neighbors still whisper. Employers, friends, distant relatives, they all saw the story unfold in real time. Humiliation had finally landed where it belonged. My parents avoided me for a while, then tried small calls about birthdays and holidays. I kept the conversations brief. There are wounds that need more than apologies. There are boundaries that once built cannot be torn down again. In the weeks that followed, I bought new locks. I painted the guest room where I had been forced to sleep while Vanessa claimed my bed. Fresh color on the walls, sunlight pouring, in an act of reclamation simple but powerful. Each brushstroke felt like breathing again. Friends began to visit, bringing laughter back into the space. One evening we sat on the balcony sharing a bottle of wine. A friend pointed at the skyline. You fought for this view. No one can say it's not yours. And for the first time I allowed myself to smile without bitterness. I am not naive. I know greed will always circle where money and property exist. Families fracture over smaller things than a one-fay Hytriel-Dola apartment. But I have learned that silence is not peace. It is a pause before you find your voice. And once you find it, you do not surrender it again. So here I am with a locked door, a trust to guard it, and a letter that reminds me I am seen. That is enough. If you think Morgan made the right choice, comment right. If you have a better way, share your idea.